Oh, Melissa, it's been the topic of the week, and you've got more.
I have talked about hurricanes in the past here on Morse Codes, but this one certainly now in the record books, tied for the strongest landfalling hurricanes ever in the Atlantic Basin, going back to when records began in 1851. There's only 3 on this map for a reason, and Melissa is joining that group for the strongest landfalling hurricanes on record in terms of wind speeds. 185-mile-per-hour sustained winds is what was observed when the hurricane made landfall on Jamaica yesterday, and that was the same as Dorian in 2019 in the northern Bahamas for the sustained wind speeds. But matching the atmospheric pressure at the center of the hurricane, 892 millibars, very low central pressure, indicates a very strong hurricane. That matches exactly the Labor Day hurricane from 1935 that struck the Florida Keys. These are the 2 strongest hurricanes ever to make landfall in the Atlantic Basin based on wind speeds and barometric pressure. But let's look at how hurricane forecasting has changed from 90 years ago in 1935 with that Labor Day hurricane to now in 2025 and the advancements that have happened over those 90 years. So the first hurricane warning was issued in 1873 by the Army Signal Corps. Tropical threat from New Jersey to Connecticut, but the storm actually ended up missing the U.S. But it was a new era of tropical forecasting. And at this time, even non-tropical forecasts were not very good. Telegraph allowed weather observations to be shared, but trying to solve the complicated equations that dictate our atmosphere to figure out what was going to happen in the coming days, we didn't have computers to help us out with that, so weather forecasting was still at its infancy. But with these telegraphs and with Morse code, we could communicate across the country to an extent, so the approach of storms from west to east over the United States, over land, could be foreseen somewhat. But with tropical systems coming from the ocean, where there's a lot fewer observations, that presented a much greater challenge to try to forecast them. In the 1890s, Congress's bill established weather stations in the Caribbean, and underwater cables connected the telegraph. So that was going to give people a heads up about storms that might hit the United States. Again, kind of a crude forecasting technology, just using what observations are being reported. And some reports from the Bahamas in 1893 helped the Weather Bureau, which was established in 1890, to forecast a hurricane that ended up striking New York City. But later that year, there is still some misses. The Weather Bureau could only say that a hurricane coming from the Atlantic would hit somewhere on the East Coast in, again, late 1893, somewhere south of New York City within 3 days. But that vague advisory did little good when the storm hit near Savannah, Georgia the next day. 16-foot storm surge, catastrophic damage, more than 1,000 people killed. In 1900, the worst natural disaster in U.S. history struck Galveston, Texas, killed more than 8,000 people. The only notice was a storm warning day before covering much of the Gulf Coast. Storm might happen somewhere, but Galveston was the place that got hit. And then that 1935 hurricane in the Florida Keys killed at least 408 people, many of them World War I veterans working on a railway to connect the Florida Keys. Storm destroyed that overseas railway and much of the structures in its path with a storm surge of up to 20 feet. So compare that hurricane forecasting technology. Again, that was one of the strongest storms ever to make landfall in 1935 to this one, tying that record for the strongest to make landfall. Melissa, this is the evolution of the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. The first advisory showing that the storm was going to slowly meander in the Caribbean and make its way towards Jamaica by last Thursday, so more than 5 days before landfall. There were already hurricane watches up for Jamaica, and then the Hurricane Center accurately forecasted that curve to the north right into the island of Jamaica. and for it to be a Category 5 major hurricane, undergo rapid intensification from a tropical storm to a major hurricane. So just incredible, the technology that we have nowadays. Satellite imagery was not around in 1935 when that Labor Day hurricane struck the Florida Keys. Now we can see the up-to-the-minute wobbles that the eye makes and pinpoint exactly where it's going to make landfall. So again, just incredible to see how much weather forecasting has changed over the past 90 years and how we tied that record for the strongest ever to make landfall in the Atlantic Basin.
It still never ceases to amaze me as a meteorologist that the amount of accuracy. I mean, this was extremely well forecast days in advance, and I think that's why we have a lot less loss of life, which is the bottom line. That is, the damage is just unbelievable, but at least a loss of life. Not like Galveston hurricane 1900, 8,000.
Yeah,
that's just incredible. So, Jacob, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jacob. Stay with us. We'll be right back.